بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله وصلى الله على النبي الأمي. So the author says ما نفع القلب شيء مثل عزلة يدخل بها ميدان فكرة. That nothing benefits the heart like isolation, such isolation with which he can enter the world of contemplation. So it's quite straightforward. The author is hinting towards the benefits of isolation and being alone. And as a very big disclaimer, right from the beginning, is that a prophet or a saintly person who's trying to guide others, most of their outward benefit will be seen when they are not isolating, when they're interacting with people. So this is not speaking about when the transfer of goodness happens from a prophet to his ummah. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the times when even the prophets are seeking loneliness and isolation. And the beautiful thing is, there's a very clear hadith about this. It mentions وَحُبِّبَ إِلَيَّ الْخَلَاء أو كما قال, where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, and isolation and loneliness was made beloved to me. So this is the time just before when he was chosen as a prophet at age 40. The months before that, he says he just fell in love with isolation. Absolutely loved being alone. So when we see the full system, it worked like this. A person looks for self-reformation in isolation, in time to work. It's basically like homework and presentations that we do at workplaces, in colleges, universities, and high schools. There's a presentation, it needs a crowd. But to get the points ready, you gotta be alone and do your homework. It's exactly like that. Spiritually, the same thing happens. To get your thoughts together, to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to be alone. Do your homework. We can call this spiritual homework. So you're doing your spiritual homework, you have to be alone. And once that goal is achieved, you're done your homework. And now you come to the spotlight and you see and interact with people, and now the benefit will be there. And when we look at this biologically, in so many different ways you can look at this. In the manufacturing world, the exact same thing happens. Biologically, for example, a child that's being conceived by the mother. For 9 months, nobody sees that child because a child needs time to itself. Under the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, khaliqiyat, the Lord is creating the child, so the child needs time with khaliqiyat. The child needs time with khaliqiyat, so he's under that sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the child is multiplying in cells, from 2 cells to 4 cells to 8 cells, and the child is multiplying, but it needs time. The child needs time. You can't, and if a child is born early, what do we call it? Premature? He's too early. He's not ready for the world. The baby's not ready for the world. He's born way too early. He needs to, and that's why they put him in that, I'm forgetting the name already. Incubator. Because the baby missed his biological homework time. He needs to go back. Isn't it? He needs time with khaliqiyat. He needs time to grow. So, and the same thing in a manufacturing world. Anything that's manufactured, it's done in a very isolated place. It can be exposed. Like for example, the cell phones that we use. Can they be in the rain before they're finished making? No. Can they be left to rusting? No. Can they be exposed to any dirt, dust? No. It has to be a very clean, precise place, and no intermixing with the different items. Every phone is made in a different part of the factory, and that's how things are made in a very proper manner. And when the product is ready, now it's ready to go into the world where people can play with it and touch it and use it. But initially, it can't be touched. If it is like it's contaminated, something's wrong with it. So even prophets who are the pinnacle of people that need to interact with the world for their benefit to transfer onto mankind, even they need time to themselves. And we're not going to be speaking about what's good. Like, we're not going to do a versus situation. Is mixing with people better versus being alone? The answer is very clear. A person who mixes with people in the right way, he is way better than someone who just avoids people because he's not beneficial enough for the world or whatever the reasons, but he's just not good enough. Because a person who mixes, there's a hadith where the Sahaba asked very specifically, oh Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's two people. One, he avoids people, so he's never hurt. He's never hurt, offended, and harmed. And there's another person who mixes with people and at times he's inconvenienced, he's hurt. So who's better? And Nabi Sallallahu made it very clear, the person who mixes with people and they're able to benefit from him, and the person has to do sabr, that person is much better. So we're not speaking about is interacting with people better or being a loner and hiding away from mankind. Is that a good thing? No, it's mixing with people while you are ready to serve in the right, perfect manner. That is always better. Right now, what the discussion is how many things are needed for that spiritual homework time. And right now, thanks to technology, even when a person is alone, he's not alone. Even when the person is alone, he has the whole world like 1 foot away from his face. So all this stuff that's going to be mentioned today, the 10 reasons why a person benefits from isolation, they will apply when isolation is done properly. Today's isolation is kids sitting in their bedrooms in front of their screens and playing games all day. So it is an isolation from mom and dad, isolation from schoolwork, but it's complete engrossment in some type of a distraction. So it's not really of any benefit. In fact, they're completely zoned out from the world. So what happens above their roof, if it's raining, snowing, and hail coming down, the kid doesn't know. So the kid just knows what's happening in those 5 meters of space. When the kid is just playing, that's his existence. And many of us, even as adults, we end up living lives like that, right? Unfortunately, so that happens. And thanks to our long winters in Canada, we end up having to do that when the winter is long. So we are sitting at home after Isha, and Isha is done at 7, and you're sleeping at 10 and 11, you got 2-3 hours. So if somebody doesn't have a good routine of working out, praying, or socializing in the right way, then they end up just sitting in front of their gadgets and wasting time. So a lot to think about, but let's not go that far, and let's start with the 10 benefits of isolation. So I'll try to read the Arabic. وَأَعْلَمْ أَنَّ فِي الْخَلْوَةِ 10 فوائد or 10 فوائد. الفائدة الأولى السلامة من آفات اللسان. Number 1 benefit is safety from the downfalls of speaking. فَإِنَّ مَنْ كَانَ وَحْدَهُ لَا يَجِدْ مَعَهُ مَا يَتَكَلَّمْ. If a person who's alone, he doesn't have anybody to talk to. So he doesn't have anybody to bother. He doesn't have anybody to sin with, to backbite with. So if the person is alone, and sins generally need 2 people, so now you don't have a second person to backbite, to slander with, so now you're alone, so you're definitely going to have less sins. Number 2, this is a very interesting one. Pay attention to this one. Hifzul basar, protection of the gaze. So when a person is alone, he's not in a gathering, so his eyes are protected. And what would be wrong with the eyes? Basically, the eye is a window into the soul. So if you are seeing a lot of materialistic things, they're being imprinted into your mind. You're basically being told, make sure you have it. So if you're in a circle, like 10 people sitting there, and 4 of them are talking about the new iPhone, so what's going to happen? You're basically being bombarded. By the time you go home, what are you thinking about? Oh, let me just check if there's any deals on that phone. So your eyes were open in that gathering. You saw people passing around the new phone. Oh, look at it, it's kind of cool. So now you're being brainwashed to go home and look for that phone. So this happens with many, many, many things. I'm giving a very kind example of a phone. It can be 10 times worse things. So, and you'll be surprised. There's ayat that mentions, oh Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, do not even turn your gaze towards the wealth that we have given to these disbelievers. Do not turn your gaze. وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ. Do not even look at the wealth that we have given these people. Because looking at wealth has a negative effect. It makes you more materialistic. I remember when we were in madrasa, it was a very obviously straightforward boarding school, kind of a boring place. Class, school, class, back to the room, class. So when we had holidays, when we used to go leave the madrasa for 10, 15 days, so the teacher would tell us in the last year, especially when we knew all these things, he's like, when you're out there, do not look at people's big houses and do not look at their cars, because it's going to affect you spiritually. When you come back to the madrasa, you'll have a materialistic touch to you. So we were just going on like a winter break or whatever the break was, and the teacher would tell us, do not look at anybody. And in South Africa, the Muslims are well off, so they have massive mansions and so on, a lot of fancy cars in front of their homes. So a lot of money that's shown. So the teacher would tell us, you're going outside for 10 days, outside the madrasa, make sure you don't look at anybody's cars, because it's going to affect you. And if you unfortunately look at social media, it's all people throwing their wealth around, isn't it? Like my new car, my Tesla, my this and my that, and it's all people showing off. So this definitely goes against this ayat where Nabi Sallallahu is told, do not look at it. So you know how we don't look at haram things? Likewise, we should avoid looking at materialism, because it really affects a person. So the second benefit of staying away from mixing with people is the protection of the gaze and being safe from the downfalls of the gaze. الفائدة الثالثة حفظ القلب وحصونه عن الرياء والمداهنة. Number 3, this is an interesting one. It's protection of the heart and saving it from, now he gives a list of ostentation, showing off, or being complacent in the religion. So this is an interesting one. When you socialize with people, generally topics will come up about religion, about how much you practice. And if you are very realistic with your spiritual morality and you're very clear on it, somebody who doesn't have that level of spirituality, what is he going to do? He's going to try to bring you down. So for example, you say, oh, I don't say salam to the sister that works with us at that office. I never say salam to her. The guy's like, no bro, you got to say salam to her. So now he's watering you down. Right away, right? Because he doesn't feel right that you are living so pious, so the person is going to water you down and make sure you do the same sin that he does because he feels bad. So generally, this is Allah talked about a lot in the Quran. Mudahana. Mudahana means to tone yourself down and to water down your ideology and your spirituality because others are forcing you to do it. For example, let's just say I'm mixing with some group that does shirk. They worship Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, for example. So now if I'm sitting with them and they keep saying, oh no, it's shirk only if you worship like a elephant or like another god. But if you just love Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to the very extreme levels and you start worshiping him just a little, it might be okay because he's a Nabi, he's not a bad person, he's a good person. So now they're watering me down, teaching me shirk because I'm mixing with them too often. If I'm sitting with him every day after Isha having timmies with him and he does shirk, what's going to happen? He's going to water me down and he's going to teach me to be complacent with my deen. So complacency comes in where you're mixing with people that have different moral values. We live at a time where LGBT rights are pushed around so much. We're basically being brainwashed to say that, oh, everything is fine as long as they're consenting adults, they're fine. So now you hear that so many times. After a while, when bad things happen, your morality is so unclear because of how many times you're told something of that nature. There's an interesting saying here between two people. So one person, he was gone to a spiritual mentor, and the mentor told him that make sure you don't look at the creation in an envious, in a very avarice way, because that is a darkness. So the person who got that advice, his lifestyle was such where he had to mix with a lot of people. So he said, La budda li, like Sheikh, I have to mix with people. So I end up seeing dunya a lot. So he said, okay, then second case is فَلَا تَسْمَعْ كَلَامَهُمْ. Do not listen to the stuff that they talk about. فَإِنَّ كَلَامَهُمْ قَسْوَةٌ. Because listening to them talk about dunya, it's a reason for your heart to become hardened. So he said, La budda li, but I'm always around them. Like I always hear them talking about dunya. So he said, okay, then don't deal with them, because dealing with them is bad for your spirituality. So he said, but I'm always with them. Ana bayna azhurihim, la budda li, I'm always interacting with these people. So he said, okay, then at least do not lean towards what they lean towards. Do not lean towards what they lean towards, because that'll be destruction for you. And the student finally said, yeah, I can do this part at least. So the person said, the student who was getting the mentorship, he said, yeah, that makes sense, I can try that part. So first he told him, don't even look it towards materialism, and then number two was, do not listen to what they talk about, or don't deal with them. And he said, oh, I have to do all these, I have to see the dunya, I have to mix with dunya, I have to listen to what they talk about. And he said, don't deal with them because I have to deal with them, then at least do not lean towards what they lean towards.
So that's by leaning by heart, right?
Yes. Yes. So this was number 3. So this was protecting the heart from being complacent when it comes to religion. Number 4, this is a nice one. حصول الزهد في الدنيا والقناعة منها. The achievement of abstinence from the world and being content when it comes to the world. So basically, generally when a person interacts with a lot of materialistic people, then he's going to be hurt often, because he's always going to feel less than them. And I'll tell you a very interesting story. There was a religious person. He had one circle of friends that were financially low class. So he would chill with them. They were his original friends. So he chilled with them all his life. And finally he found a different circle of Muslims who were well-to-do. So he started mixing with them. So, but then he realized they always had better clothing and better horses. So he realized over those few weeks he started getting more depressed, more sad all the time. So he's like, I don't know why I'm always sad nowadays. And then he goes, oh, because I keep seeing these guys, they always have their damn new clothes and their damn new cars, and I'm always stressed. Okay, I'm going back to my old friends. How with these guys? They're stressing me. So he goes, I left them, they're stressing me too much. I went back to my old friends. Now I'm the happiest guy there because my car is not that old, and we all have old cars, so we can mix with each other. So that is the reality. It was a very funny, cute story, but the reality is if you mix with somebody who's too well, it just hurts you for no reason. And I heard a very interesting example. If you went to work and somebody tells you, oh, you're getting a 25 cents raise or $1 raise in your hour wage, you're like, yes, you're happy. But if somebody tells you, oh, but the other guy got $2 raise, suddenly you're depressed again. So what happened there? As humans, we don't care how much blessings we have. We only care about people that have more blessings than us. They bother us the most. Our blessings or having lack of blessings, it never hurts us. We are only jealous of the rest of mankind. So when somebody in your workplace has got a $2 raise, that bothers you and drives you crazy, as opposed to you getting no raise. When nobody got a raise, you're fine, you're happy. And if you got a $1 raise, you're like, yeah, you're jumping over the moon. But now when you find out somebody got a $2 raise, For some reason, you go home like upset, and for the whole night you can't sleep because you're so angry because somebody else got a $2 raise. Although when you got a dollar raise, you're already happy. So this has a lot to do with, I guess, personal contentment. So if you don't mix with people that are financially really well, then you end up becoming more content in life. And there's a beautiful hadith, we have to share this, izhad fi dunya yuhibbuk Allah. That be abstinent of the world, which is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then yuhibbuk Allah. Allah will love you. So be abstinent from whatever the Lord created in the world, Allah will love you. But number two, wazhad fima aydin nas, yuhibbuka nas. And now become abstinent to what the humans, what the people own. What people own, become abstinent towards that, and the people will also start loving you.
Can you
So,
repeat
yeah, so be abstinent to whatever's in the world, Allah will love you. And be abstinent to what the people possess, and the people will love you. So basically, humans were very greedy and protective over what is ours. So if you never look at somebody's property in that weird, jealous way, they're gonna love you. For example, like for example, if your phone was out of your pocket and was sitting in front of you, and for a few seconds I just looked down at the phone, you're gonna feel weird, like, yo, bro, this guy keeps looking at my phone. Is he okay? Why is he looking at my phone all the time? Is he so cheap he can't get his own phone?
Some people do that, they put their phone for some reason.
Yeah, so if I keep looking at it, what is that gonna do to your heart? You're not gonna like me. Simply because I just looked at your property. So when a person does the last part of the hadith, he doesn't turn his eyes towards what the people possess. People start loving him because they're like, oh, he never checks out whatever I have in life. And this one of the icky parts about this one is don't look at people's cars. Many times people are driving, and you know that brother, the first thing our eyes does is look towards the rest of the car, like, oh, is his wife, children with him? And you start looking at his whole car. That's very invasive. And the brain like just wants to scan everything, like, oh, he's there. And you start looking throughout his whole car. That is so invasive. That is so invasive because we looked into his whole car. We didn't just look at the brother because he said salam to you. You looked at him, then you went through his whole car. That's basically like entering his car. That's why Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when a person tried to look into the house of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam through the curtain, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw him, he said, oh, I would have poked your eye out if you did that again. Because the reason why we knock is li'ajl al-basar, is because we don't want to enter somebody's home in an awkward moment. So we knock to tell the people that might be coming in, so be in a comfortable and a safe situation. So now, if a person knocks, but he's already looking through the curtains, he's basically inside the house. He's basically inside the house through his gazes. So there's no point of asking, he already came in through your eyes. So the eyes are very, like the rules of the eyes are very, very tricky. So how we use it, so a person who doesn't mix with people, hopefully he learns not to be invasive and look too deeply into somebody's life. And the other awkward example is when somebody comes into your house and starts looking at everything too carefully. Isn't it strange? They look at your computer for a little long. They look at the frames on the wall for a little too long, and you get creepy, like, yo, this guy's staring at the house way too much. And if you have a watch on, like I don't have a watch, but if somebody had a watch on and somebody keeps looking at it, you get awkward, like, oh man, this guy looking at my property. So the hadith is telling us, be abstinent to what the people possess and the people will love you. So that was the internal one. Now the external one, number 5th, as-salamatu min suhbatil ashrar. When you're isolated and not mixing with the people, you're saved from having bad companions. You're saved from having bad companions and bad people that you mix with, and this goes really like downhill. If you're in your own friend circle and they're all semi-decent people, then at least you know they're all decent people. But if there's 3-4 extra guys that are, you don't know how they are, and 2-3 of them are very like low standard, you have come to a very bad circle instantly. If one of them has been to like really bad circles, he has like criminal records, he's in bad trouble, he was in a gunfight last month. So now you just sitting there, you instantly become a target. You would instantly become a target because the dude had a gunfight last Saturday. So you had no trouble. You just came to have a Timmy's cup with him or sit behind your building, but the dude had a gunfight last week. How are you gonna sit with him? You're basically like a walking gun target. Somebody's gonna shoot you because the guy had a gunfight. So look at how quickly you leaving your house just to sit behind your building instantly becomes a very dangerous situation simply because of who you sat with. And how did that happen? The lack of isolation. You're not being by yourself. You're mixing with too many people. And if you look at many of the weekends where gun battles happen, many of bystanders die because they were in the party with the wrong guys. So a random kid got shot, random girl got shot, random guy got shot, and the kid might be graduating next week from something big, but then he got shot as a bystander because he was in the wrong crowd. So mixing with the wrong crowd and sitting with very low quality people, that is a very big fitna and a very bad thing, yes?
Well, sometimes if you look at someone, going to the previous point, if you look at someone's property, like maybe the brother got a good Tesla or
Good.
a new iPhone.
Yes,
So should you say mashallah or anything like that?
for sure. The hadith is like I think quite clear, especially there's ayat in the Quran too. Surah Kahf, it mentions when you look at your own property, why don't you say masha'Allahu la quwwata illa billah? We normally say mashallah, right? But you're supposed to add la. Yeah. I think it's la quwwata illa billah. ولولا إذ دخلت جنتك قلت ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله. So yeah, you're supposed to say لا قوة إلا بالله. So whatever the wording, because I'm sure hadith has some wordings too, but the main thing is to, when you see somebody's property, and even your own property, you're supposed to say mashallah. So yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, it all depends on what happens to your face when you see somebody in well-to-do. If your face changes a little negatively for a millisecond, your inner insecurities are kicking in. So if I see you with the Tesla, Rashid, and I'm jealous, like, yo, bro, he got a Tesla, and my face, and they say if you study psychology, it gets very tricky, all this stuff. So psychology says that when somebody tells you something that you don't approve of for like a millisecond, I think it's your left part of your face, it actually frowns a bit. For example, your boss tells you you're staying for 1 hour extra, and you're like, oh, okay, sure, I'll do it. But your face changes for that millisecond because you didn't approve of him telling you to stay for 1 hour. So same thing with ni'mats. If other people's ni'mats triggers me for a millisecond, do I have a good heart? No, I don't. So even my mashallah doesn't really mean much because I have a negative heart.
Yeah.
So at least I said mashallah, but sometimes people are so negative because of their jealousies and their insecurities. Like you hope they say mashallah because they might give you nazar. And the hadith is clear, somebody could give you an evil eye. So definitely a part of this would be not to show off with our blessings. So taking our wedding pictures, many guys have the audacity to put their wedding pictures up on Facebook. Like, bro, you're taking your biggest blessing, your wife, and that special day, and you're putting it up for random people on Facebook. Whoa, like that's a lot of generosity, bro. You're putting your wife up for the world to see. Like, how generous are you? Isn't it like so strange? People are putting up their own wife's picture, especially your wife dressed the best she'll ever be dressed. A wedding day pictures. And a person is actually putting up those pictures up for the whole world. So that's very awkward. Are you coming in to pray?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on in. But try your best next time to come from the other door. This is just like a ventilation door.
Oh.
Yeah, no problem. Come on in, brother. Come on in. Come on in. The washrooms are over there and the prayer hall is right here. So be very careful with how much you share your blessings. Some people go outside, eat food, and then take a picture of it. So it's not healthy to do that. Always taking pictures and sharing it on the different sites. So that was number 5, staying away from, saving yourself from bad companions. Number 6 is التفرغ للعبادة, the ability to be free for worship and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having steadfastness in piety and good deeds. So this was the case when a person is very clear-hearted, clear-minded, he's able to worship. If a person is not distracted all the times, then at least he can worship. So number 6 benefit would be that the person is free of distractions. So for example, I'm not distracted by my phone and I'm just sitting in my house. So after a little while, I'm like, okay, what do I do? Oh, this is a nice book. I was thinking about it for like months. I haven't read it because I'm not distracted. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do something good with it, for that, with my time. Or I'll see my tasbih and I'm like, oh, I didn't do zikr today. So let me do some zikr. So when a person is free, at least there's a chance of him turning towards worship. And generally that happens easily when a person is isolated. So let's just say after Isha today, either you go to your own quiet space or you go chill with your friends. If you're chilling with your friends, it's impossible for you to pick up the Quran and start reading because they're all talking. It's very rare friends sit down and start reading the Qurans together. Right? So if you're alone, you might do that. So being alone, it has that benefit. And the next one is wijdanu halawati ta'at, a feeling the ecstasy and the sweetness of worship. So this is something that we hardly achieve because generally our worship sessions are so short. By the time we're warming up, our worship is finished. For example, you came from Maghrib. So now you were distracted in the first rakat because of the drive here or the walking here. Now you're standing there. So your mind is just about to calm down, but the Imam says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and the salat is over. So you barely were just warming up and the salat is already over. You pray 2 rakats and now you're like, okay, I'm going to go now. Because the time that we had for worship was so minimal, we were just getting warmed up and then it just finished. So but if a person has like 30 minutes of worship time, can you imagine how warmed up he's going to be after 10 minutes? He's going to be really in a big spiritual state because he worshiped more than 5-10 minutes. So this is something that we really need to work on. Number 7 is having more time to worship. It's going to be tricky because if we're not used to sitting alone and worshiping and not getting distracted by something, it's going to be a new experience for many of us because we don't do that too often. But once you do it, we're going to feel something because we finally got in the zone. And many, self-help channels will talk about this. They call it the flow. The flow is when your brain just gets really engrossed in what you're doing. So that happens after a little while, and then once it gets going, you don't want to stop because you know if you stop, you're not going to be able to get to that level. So the flow, it's really, really interesting, whether it's your own work, your schoolwork, your actual career, or even exercising or anything. Once you get going, the first few minutes is when a person is not decided. Once he dives in, it becomes very easy. And as a side note, if you want to try something and you're being very distracted, your nafs is not able to connect with it, just start it for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, your body will calm down, your soul will calm down, and you'll enjoy whatever you're doing. For example, worship, homework, clean up at home, any extra chores, exercising, dhikr, Quran, whatever it is. The first 2-3 minutes, that's what the nafs is like, oh, I don't want to. And then once you start doing it, suddenly everything becomes easier. So only the first 2-3 minutes, that's what the struggle is. And after that, it becomes much easier. So that was number 7, feeling the sweetness of worship and the lazzat of talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a very high level of communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when a person is talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know what that feels like when we have our spiritual highs in Ramadan, in different parts of our life, or maybe after a very serious salat, we made a very serious dua, we felt something. But imagine if a person can feel that like 3, 4, 5 times a day, the very high feelings. So that will happen if a person is spending more time in worship, in munajat. Munajat is a very interesting word. It means to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So munajat. Al-faidatu thamina, the 8th benefit. This is a really interesting one. This is very applicable to all of us. Rahatul qalbi wal badani, the peace of heart and the peace of body. Because when a person is interacting with people, he's constantly concerned about what they need to be comfortable. So for example, you invite a few friends to your house, and now you're thinking, oh, is he thirsty? Is he comfortable? What we are talking about, is he okay with that? oh, is he triggered right now because of what he said? So now you're constantly thinking the whole time. But if nobody is there, you're just at peace because all this dynamics are not there. So that's why many times when we come back from big parties, we're like, oh, alhamdulillah, it's over finally. I was so stressed. Because when a party is going on, a person is tense at that moment because of how many things are happening there. But once all that is over, a person is like, okay, finally it's over. الفائدة التاسعة, the ninth benefit, صيانة نفسه ودينه من التعرض للشرور والخصومات. And the next one is saving yourself and your religion from mixing with other people's fights and arguments and debates. So if people are arguing and you're not getting involved in it, then you're saved. You're not taking any sides, and you're not going to be taking those serious steps. And a good example of this would be when somebody keeps bringing up incidents that happened long time ago. Like amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, there was some infighting. So now if somebody keeps bringing that up, you're like, I'm not part of that. That was gone long time ago. I wasn't alive where I had to take side A or side B, so I don't want to talk about it. It's not part of my aqidah. Or which Sahabi did which. They have their Lord, they have to answer. All we know is the Quran says, كُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى. Every one of them, Allah has promised something good for them. So I don't care which Sahabi you like more, which Sahabi you think took a very unsafe step in that political situation. I'm not having any of it. I'm not having any of it. So many times these kind of debates come up and they're very painful because as humans, they made judgment errors. As humans all do. So why go deep into it? That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, لا تتخذوهم غرضا من بعدي. Do not make them a target after me. Do not make them a target after me. So why are we talking about the mistakes of others? So let's leave it there. And the last one he mentions, this is the main one, it is a tamakkun min ibadati tafakkur wal i'tibar. It is having the moment to contemplate and to take heed. To take lessons from others. So for example, you are thinking in your mind like, oh, what are the harms of dunya? So now you're thinking of a certain story of Fir'aun or someone like that, or other people that made big mistakes because of their love for dunya. So now your mind goes into a deep state and says, oh yeah, I shouldn't make that mistake. For example, somebody who almost was exposed to sins, like Yusuf alayhi salam, he had an awkward situation, but he came out of it safe. So now your mind is able to go through these lessons because you're calm, you're thinking about these things. You find out, oh, this guy did something bad before his marriage. You're like, oh, astaghfirullah, why did he do that sin? I don't want to do that. So now you're able to think about these things. So now what does it do? It sharpens your game. So for example, now next week some girl wants to talk to you, like, no. Because you thought about the other guy who made a serious mistake. Let's just say he had a baby before he was even married. So now you're thinking, oh shoot, this guy what the hell was he doing? But you can only think that far when you're thinking about it and you're taking heeds and lessons from life. And these things happen in any time to think about these things. So these were the 10 benefits of being in isolation. If you guys want, I can quickly go through it. Number 1 was safety from the destruction of speech. So you're not able to say anything dangerous. Number 2 was protection of the sight. So you're not seeing materialism and it's not affecting your heart. Number 3 was protection of the heart from all sorts of undesirable traits. Yeah, and especially complacency. So being with people, we end up being complacent with our religion. And number 4 was abstinence. So a person becomes more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he has less attraction to dunya. And likewise, people love him more because he's abstinent towards what people possess. Number 5 was staying out of trouble. So protection from bad companions. Number 6 was the free time to worship and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the time to stay firm on worship and so on. And number 7 was experiencing the sweetness of worship. and feeling the ecstasy of talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through munajat, through dhikr and so on. Number 8 was the being safe from social anxiety and the pressures of a social circle. And number 9 was saving a person's own deen from getting into other people's fights and quarrels. And number 10 was the time to reflect and contemplate over all sorts of things. And one of them would be the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a person thinks about deep things that are explained to us through the Quran and the Hadith, a person learns to value and really appreciate things. For example, let's just give like 2-3 examples. At this moment, how many plants are growing right now for the benefit of mankind? So fruits, vegetable, herbs, all around the world. How much of them are growing just right now when the sun has risen somewhere else in the world? So all the benefit that's coming, that makes you feel like subhanAllah, Allah is always doing something for the creation's growth. How much milk is being produced right now in the udders of cows? How many babies are growing in the stomach of the mothers right now as we speak? How many baby birds are hatching right now in from eggs in the nest of the mother birds? So all these things, we think about it when we have a moment, and that is a type of i'tibar. How many people are dying at this moment? How many people are breathing their last breath right now? So all these types of i'tibar, a person is able to do that when a person is giving himself time to be reflective. And the last disclaimer that's mentioned in our books of tazkiyah is, what if a person ends up with a reversed effect, where a person is spending a lot of time by themselves, so they are reaching a good level, but now it's leading to a lot of pride. So let's just say I sat 10 minutes in the corner, so I'm like, yo, I'm too pious now. He's laughing at me already. I'm like, subhanallah, subhanallah. Oh bro, he didn't even do zikr, I did 10 minutes. So now you're thinking like you're serious, you're something. And that brings us to a very funny thing our teacher once told us. He goes, some simple people, they pray 2 rakat salat and they start waiting for wahi. Al-Badawiyu iza raka raka'atayn yantazir al-wahi. He goes, some simple people, they pray 2 rakats and start looking up at the sky like, am I next? Am I going to be the next Nabi? Because they're so simple, they feel like, oh, I'm too pious, I prayed 2 rakats and I made dua, so it's done. So some people are that simple, they worship a little, but they feel like they made it. So what if that's happening? For example, I'm spending some time in some worship, but it's having a negative effect, as in I'm starting to look down upon people. So that is against the grain type of effect. So that shouldn't have happened. But it is a negative effect, side effect of staying by yourself. But that doesn't mean quickly going and mixing with the people to fix that problem. Although if the companionship that you can have is of good people, you could mix with them. If the people that you could mix with, they're actually decent people, then you should mix with them for a little while just to undo that effect. And another way to look at it would be that you remind yourself all over again, and remind yourself why you're sitting in that corner in the first place. You remind yourself that I was sitting here for 2 reasons. One is to save myself from the harm of other people, but vice versa also. To save others from the harm of my behavior and my thoughts. So when a person looks at it that way, even when his soul tells him, oh no, you're so pious, you sat here for 10 minutes, you're so pious now, you're like, yeah, that's why you're sitting here, because you're crazy. So you remind yourself, no, you're so mutakabbir, that's why you're sitting all alone, because Allah wants to give you time to think about how terribly arrogant you are. So you sat here for 10 minutes, now I'm thinking, oh, I made it. Yeah, that's why you're sitting here, because you need time to yourself and to realize there's thousands of people out there worshiping Allah, they're not having that negative effect. You're only having it because you never worship. That's why you worship for a week, and now you're thinking you're so pious because you never worship Allah for a week straight. So the fact that you're having these very arrogant thoughts is a sign you never worship for 5-6 days straight in a good state. So that will do the opposite. It will actually make us feel more miserable and tell us, no, I'm having arrogant thoughts is because I never worship properly. The fact that minimum worship makes me feel so arrogant, that just tells you I have never worshipped. It's like a guy that does 5 push-ups and goes, I think I'm strong. like a guy that has 5 push-ups. He goes, yo, I'm too big. You're like, yeah. That's a sign you never did a push-up in your life. That's why you feel so strong already. So that's how piety is. When a person does minimal and he feels too big, that's a sign that he's done very little worship. And we can finish off this book at least on a very light note. Some pious person, he came to the Khalifa's house. And the Khalifa was a decent person, but he wasn't an overly pious person. So he knocked on his door, goes, oh, where's the Khalifa? I have to talk to him. I want to have a meeting. He's like, oh, he's praying salat. He's like, oh, okay. So this pious person, he leaves. And then he comes again after a little while, and then he knocks, he goes, I want to talk to the Khalifa. He's like, oh, he's praying. He's like, what? Must be something new to him. Because he's so excited, he's praying so much salat. It must be his first day, so he's praying salat. And that's why he's spending so much time in his worship, and he doesn't want to stop. So he kind of hinted that it looks like the Sheikh just started praying his first salats, his nafil optional prayers. That's why he's so excited he won't stop and he won't talk to anybody. So I hope that was clear. And remember, at the end of the day, when a person has fixed himself and saved himself from his own harm and saved other from his harm, then there will be time when he needs to go and mix with people and benefit. For example, every one of you sitting here, you're spiritually benefiting somebody, because by you sitting here and learning something good, what are you teaching other people? That it's very important to spend time on good things so you can learn something. So you not doing isolation is the better thing to do right now, if that makes sense. Like you being sitting here and interacting with us is a sign that sometimes mixing with people is more beneficial than being alone. Once the servant has completed his lifespan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the angel of death to take his soul. When he is buried, Allah returns life to the person such that he comprehends the questioning of the grave and is able to respond. So basically what we are reading is our aqidah, the basic of our aqidah. So the author is explaining that when a person has passed away, we fully believe he will be questioned in the grave. And the two angels, Munkar and Nakir, come to him and make him sit up. They then ask him, what? So now here we generally hear 3 questions, right? But here in some narrations, it looks like just one question is asked. So he sticks with that and he says, what did you used to say regarding this man? So the person replies, if he was a pious person, he responds, he is a servant of Allah and his messenger. I bear witness that there is no deity except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. The two angels then say, we surely knew that this is what you would say. Meaning we knew you're a good person, you would answer very rightly. They then expand for him his grave, the measure of 70 square cubits, and fill it with light for him. It is then said to him to go to sleep. But the servant who's in the grave, he's excited, so he asks, shall I return to my family and inform them? Because the person is like dead, but he doesn't realize he's dead. So he's like, can I go talk to my family that I'm going to be in a good state? So they tell him, sleep like a newly wed bride who is not awakened except by the most beloved of family members. In other words, you were a good person, you gave a good answer, you passed, go to sleep, and the next person to wake you up is going to be somebody that really loves you. Meaning, by the time we wake up on the day of judgment, your loved ones will be near you and you're going to feel the family love. So don't worry, you are with family and loved ones. The servant then remains in this state until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects him from what this comfortable abode is of his. The hypocrite, on the other hand, responds to the questions by saying, I heard people saying some things, so I said the same thing, I know not. So this is a very general answer about a hypocrite who lives his life and he just regurgitates whatever he heard other people say. Meaning, like, people just say the slogans of other people. They don't really think about life themselves. So the hypocrite is like that. He doesn't really have any clear beliefs. You put him beside people that believe in God, he's like, yeah, I kind of believe in God too. But you put him beside atheists, like, yeah, I don't believe in God. He's just playing the double game, depending on who he's sitting with. The two angels then say to him, we surely knew you would say that. It is then said to him, it is then said to the earth, constrict upon him. And then it does so, such that his ribs are put out of place. He remains therein, being punished until Allah Most High resurrects him from that horrible abode of his. And this questioning occurs for every dead person, whether they are young or old. This includes those that disappear and are not buried, like people that are in the body of another animal, like if somebody was eaten, or the one person who drowns in the sea, and let's just assume like the birds or the fishes ate him. So now what's going to happen? Even then he'll be questioned, although we outwardly imagine the body is not there anymore, but this questioning will take place. The prophets, however, are not questioned according to the sounder position. So it seems there's two opinions. Are the prophets asked these questions in the grave? And the better opinion is no, they're not asked these questions, because the prophets came down as teachers, and generally teachers are not tested for exam day. So the akhirat is like an exam, the qabr is the exam, and you don't test the teachers because they came to teach mankind. And by the way, the angel of death, many of us might assume a certain name for that angel. What is it mostly? Israel. But that is one opinion, the weaker opinion. And the stronger opinion, I think, is Ismail. So if you do some more like heavy hadith-based research, you'll find out the angel of death. It doesn't really matter. This is like a very small discussion. But Israel is famous. But the more asah opinion, I think the angel of death is Ismail. And in case you're wondering, the il part at the end of the names is sort of like the name Allah, like Abdullah. So Jibreel, Mikael, Israfil, Ismail, all these have that kind of a meaning at the end. So may Allah give us tawfiq to understand, and Allah make it easy for us to adopt whatever good was said. آخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله عليه